And joining us now is D. Brian Burghart. He's the editor of Reno News and Review. And we're going to talk about his project, Fatal Encounters, which is a crowdsourced project to create a national database of basically all police-involved shooting in the country. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. And it's not all police-involved shooting, it's only deaths. Deaths,
got it. Okay, got it. So I'm glad you're on the show today because obviously this has been in the news, and it's something that actually shocked me when I was reading this. I was familiar with the Fatal Encounters project. I had come across it before, but I didn't.
Is that right?
But I didn't realize though that that there was no. That there was. I thought you were actually just creating something for the public or in some sort of way getting specifics in terms of, maybe there's someone out there tracking, like I said before, all police involved shooting or something, and I wasn't quite understanding that there wasn't anyone out there doing that. But I'm shocked to know that there's no agency or no big organization with, who specializes in collecting data. There's nobody doing this.
Isn't it incredible?
I'm shocked. And I'm glad you're here. So let's start with, what is Fatal Encounters?
Okay, Fatal Encounters. It's just as you described it. It's a database that records people who are killed by law enforcement. It's not just shootings. It's if they get in a car accident or asphyxiation or something like that. It's not incarcerated people. That's another needed database, but I'm not doing it. So the idea is to compare certain things, like the race of the person killed, the age, the gender, whether there were obvious signs of mental illness. So we can look at those statistics and determine if one area of the country is performing better than another area. And if that's true, then we can change policies, procedures, training, protocol to get the best results in kind of crisis situations.
It's like I said before. I mean, especially hearing your what you just said. It's stunning to me that no one has previously. I mean, I'm talking about those directly involved, aka the police. I mean, that they wouldn't want to have this data so they could create policies. I mean, even lawmakers, obviously, to create policies that can stop unnecessary police violence.
It's crazy.
So you have this.
It's literally crazy.
It is. It is. I'm glad you actually wrote this piece too. You wrote something for Gawker that I read on Friday, and it's and it's called "What I've Learned from 2 Years Collecting Data on Police Killings," and I just basically want you to discuss what you've learned, because there's one line especially that just, it should be obvious, but I guess to just see it, someone writing it, you especially, who's been working on this project, to see you just basically say this, what the biggest thing you've taken away from the project was, it's stunning to me, and it's true.
Yeah, well, the biggest thing I took away is the reason we don't have a database is because somebody doesn't want it.
Yes.
I mean, it seems almost too obvious to say, but God, this is the 21st century where every detail of what kind of gum you chew or where you buy your sunglasses is available to somebody. It's databased, and this kind of information is not. It's just. I keep calling it crazy because I don't know a better word.
Yeah, I mean, so what is some of the things you've gone through when trying to collect this data so you can make this database? You go into the different agencies that have caused you, I guess, trouble in trying to collect this.
Let's. My original idea for this was that I wanted to make public records requests of every single state and local law enforcement agency in the United States. That was actually the part of it that I was going to crowdsource.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the FBI because they have this thing called the Uniform Crime Report.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with it?
I'm not. No.
Well, it's their main data point for crime.
Okay.
So they collect it from, I think it's around 16,000 state and local law enforcement agencies. It's a voluntary thing, but almost everyone participates. So all I wanted was their mailing list. I wanted their database so that I could figure out a way to enable people to make public records requests in their own local area. This is all just conceptual at that point because I didn't know how easy or how hard crowdsourcing this was going to be. So originally they turned down the document or the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request, saying that the information did not exist. Well, it's a bald-faced lie.
Yeah.
Of course it exists. They have to send out their mailing list. So I responded to that email or to that request, and I made it broader. So basically that where the one was very targeted, all I want is your mailing list, I had to ask for a much larger thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what they did was, and this is, I guess it's probably over 8 months or so. That's kind of the game. They think they can outweight you. So even if they do eventually give you the information, you can't use it because you got a new job or your editor told you to move on or something along those lines. So when they did finally respond, they responded with a CD. What they had done was instead of sending me the electronic version of the database, which is completely within my rights to ask for, they printed it out, and it was on, the original printing was on legal-size sheets, and then they printed it onto 8.5 by 11 sheets, and then they scanned those as JPEGs, not even PDFs, so I could scan them. And then they sent me that.
Wow.
So even though they maybe technically responded, they sent me something that was absolutely useless. I mean, there's no way that wasn't intentional.
Oh, it's like impossible to even, scrape the data off the way they sent it.
Yeah, exactly. You can look at it. It's on the post section of the of fatalencounters.org. It's in the Freedom of Information Act updates is what it's called. So at any rate, there was another agency that I discovered while doing my research called the U.S. Census of State and Local Law Enforcement Agencies that actually has almost all the state and local law enforcement agencies in the United States. And so I just called their lead statistician and said, would you mind sending me your database? And he sent it to me on an Excel spreadsheet. It took a couple weeks because he was busy. But yeah, so on my website under Public Records Tool or something, under Tools, all 17,985 state and local law enforcement agencies can be checked by state and then county, and all I have to do is print it out and write the FOIA, and it can be done. A lawyer from Texas, actually called me on Saturday asking for all the state and local law enforcement agencies in Texas, and he's doing a public records request of all of them for me.
So I mean, so they're making it as hard for you as possible, obviously. But
that's the top. I mean, you get down to the bottom, like at the county level or even the state level.
Oh, yes.
For example, I'm trying to make some comparison between Nevada and Idaho, and so I sent the Idaho State Police simple public records request. And they sent it back and said, we have no data that matches your request. And then, so I'm doing my regular research, and I discover, an incident where a state patrolman killed a guy on the freeway. So I sent a link to the person who turned down my request, and I said, hey, how is this possible? You don't have any records of this. And then she gets back to me, well, we have records, we're just not going to give them to you.
Wow. Almost in that many words. So I got in a battle with, I can't remember what
her title is. It's like Assistant Attorney General, something like that. I could look it up if it's important. But now she's arguing that that public records laws don't force her to do this, basically. But they do, because I can read their public records law. So and then you get farther down to the county. I went through battles. The first story in this 6-part series I did was basically about the battles, just trying to get documents in Washoe County, which I've lived here since 1984. I know these people, and still they battle me.
I mean, there's more to this too, though, and you go into it in your piece for Gawker about what else you learned. And I mean, there's no way that you're the first journalist to try to get this information.
You wouldn't think so.
So what is going on that end of things, where journalism and the reporters are just basically going along with with what police are saying? Oh, we can't get this information, fine, and these things aren't being reported.
Right, and that's the game. It's like if they put up enough of a delay tactic, reporters have to move on. They have to. Most news organizations don't have money to sue for public records. It's as simple as that. I mean, like Gannett, for example, sues. That's maybe why it's better here in Reno than in many places. Mm-hmm. But mostly, if you tell your editor, they say it's going to be 6 weeks before I can do this story, the editor's going to say, well, go do something on cleaning up the river. They'll move the reporter along.
So from the information you've compiled so far, it's been about, you said 2 years since you've been running the project?
Actually, that's kind of an exaggeration. I've actually been collecting information since about the beginning of this year.
Okay.
So I've got three levels of how it works. I've got about 2,000 that's just in the cloud drive, hasn't been formatted even well enough to get onto a spreadsheet. Mm. I've got one spreadsheet that's just stuff I scraped off the internet, like Wikipedia or various newspaper databases around the country. But it's missing information that's crucial to what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So that's a second layer. That's the crowdsourcing part that I'm using right now, where somebody looks at that information, they basically fill in a form on my website, and they add the information. Like sometimes it's just zip code or things like that. Mm-hmm. Because in the reports that you find, some of this information, the reporters didn't get this information from the police or whatever agency they went through. And that's what's missing, basically. Like, for example, when a newspaper reports about a police-involved shooting, they might not add the background of it, the race of the person, etc. Is that correct? Right. Because, okay. I mean, according to AP style or just kind of journalistic ethics, you generally don't report race in crime unless it is like a hate crime where it's germane to the story. Mm-hmm. But as we're discovering in the United States, when there's
it's always germane to
an
the story.
officer-involved killing, it's always germane. Yeah, exactly. So mental illness is another huge factor. In 2 years in Washoe County, 4 people were killed by police, and 3 of them were mentally ill, and the officer knew it when they went there. They were called for a suicide. So it's if they had better training, and I think the training around here is pretty good. I've worked with some members of the Reno Police Agency that are specifically trained for mentally ill people in crisis. So if the training were better 2 years ago, I have a feeling that some of those people would have survived. And if only 2 did, it'd be 50%.
Yeah. So what you've discovered basically in terms of from what the data you've collected is that you would say that the mentally ill and black males are the usually the victim of deadly police shootings.
that part of it kind of got simplified. It relates to urban density, and this doesn't come directly from the data. It's just kind of what I think as I look at the data, because we haven't gotten down to real number crunching yet. The more urban dense a place is, the more likely, the darker the person's going to be who gets killed. So if you go to one of these spread out western cities, that person's going to be brown. If you go to very low urban density, like a small town in Nebraska, that person's going to be mentally ill and white. So the race spectrum goes from urban dense to not urban dense, black to white, and then it seems to be a greater percentage of mentally ill in lower dense places, and I would theorize that's because in those kind of less wealthy areas, the police don't get the training to deal with mentally ill people.
Interesting.
But they do in the big cities, so that's why
Yes.
it seems like there's a spectrum, sort of.
So what has any I mean, I know you've only been doing this for a short time, regardless of whether it's been the beginning of this year or 2 years now. That's short for what we're talking about, regardless. But but has any agency or law enforcement at all tried to reach out to you and on their own, not you trying to pull data from them, and try to say, we want to use this information you're collecting to help us?
Sort of. The president of the New York City police union sent me some information about officer-involved shootings. So he's trying to help get the information in there. I presume because he realizes what its use is. So has anybody said, do you have enough numbers that we can figure something out? No, nobody has yet.
So what I mean, was there a specific event that maybe you were reporting on or you saw that made you say, I got to look for this, and then when you found that there was no such thing, you decided this is what I need to do?
Yeah, there were two actually. I was driving home from work one afternoon, and right through downtown Reno, just past the river, and I could see this scene where there were just cop cars, just like somebody had stirred up an ant's nest. It was just filled, and I just knew that somebody had been killed there. It was obvious, even though I didn't stop, I didn't talk to anyone. So I went home and I immediately started searching. I just wanted to know how often that happens in Washoe County or even Nevada or just anywhere. And that information was not available. It just a giant black hole. So I just kind of blew it off, to be honest. I thought maybe my search was not deep enough or something. So then a few months later, I was reading, I thought I read it on Gawker, but it must have been somewhere else because I couldn't find the original, about this kid down at the University of Southern Alabama. And he was, I believe he was 18 years old, and he showed up at the cop station there, stark naked, on drugs, obviously unarmed. He weighed, I think, about 130 pounds, just a little kid.
Yeah.
And he went there, and my gut tells me he went there for help, and the cop came out, guns drawn. Those two never got within 5 feet of each other, and Gil Collar ended up dead. Wow. Shot in the chest, just killed. No less lethal methods attempted. No call for backup. And this is me looking at it from Reno, Nevada. I don't actually know if he did attempt to call backup or whatever. But again, I went, God, how often does that happen? And that's when I came across a story that had been done in Las Vegas, Nevada, of all places, that mentioned this lack of a database, that nobody tracks this information. So that's when I decided at that moment that I was going to track it. And then I started working to figure out how to do it.
I'm very glad you do, because this is, I mean, we talked about it at the beginning, but I can't get over this. I mean, it's to me, it's the paragraph that just in your article in Gawker that just draws you in to the point where you just like, it seems so obvious, but just to see it written down, the fact that there is no such database is because there's no government agency that wants you to know this information. I mean,
Right.
we're in a world where they collect so much information, and it comes out that they do, and you think this would be one of the things that they would want you to know they collect. And even if they didn't, you think that would eventually come out too. But I am just shocked that there is
It's appalling. It really is appalling. And the thing is, they have the method to do it. They have
easily.
the UCR. They could easily add a line item to collect that information. It's the fact that they don't is clear indication that they don't want to. I mean, that's kind of horrifying.
I mean, even you would think that even the very fact of creating a database alone would show that we want this out there because we care. It's boggling that they wouldn't even do that.
It's boggling. It's boggling.
So I want to make sure.
And hopefully through this kind of media attention, I mean, just in like basically since Ferguson, USA Today did a major story on the lack of a database. NPR did a major story on the lack of a database. Scripps News did a story on the lack of a database. The problem is they hadn't noticed my database before they did their stories, but mine's just a baby. I mean, literally, that thing launched in February, so it's not 10% of where it needs to be.
Mm. Well, I'm sure you're well far ahead than anything else out there.
It's the biggest that exists.
Yeah.
It's just not big enough.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yes. And I think I want to get this information out there so it could become big enough or big as it needs to be. The website is fatalencounters.org. You can help by just going to that site and reading what needs to be done. You can help crowdsource this information. If I understand correctly, you have stories, accounts up there that just needs background added. And so people don't even need to go out there blind as to what they need to look for. You have information for them that they just need to fill in the blanks.
Exactly.
And so please, if anyone's interested or has the time, fatalencounters.org, D. Brian Burghart of the Reno News and Review and of fatalencounters.org. Thank you so much for joining us today and telling us what you've learned since creating this project.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been my pleasure.